The 6th World Circular Economy Forum, WCEF 2022, is taking place from the 6th to the 8th of December in Kigali, Rwanda. This year's forum will focus on how a circular economy can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, support climate change adaptation, safeguard biodiversity, and create jobs. Under the theme, From Africa to the World, the forum will present a wide range of circular solutions for different industries and sectors. Let's discuss this further. And I'm joined by one of the participants, Karen Bwomsma, who is in Kenya, who is from Kenya Plastics Pact project and is lead there at that project. Karen, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. So I read and read over again, and I got interested and fascinated about the concepts that will be discussed at this forum. But first things first, circular economy, what is that as opposed to which economy?
Yes, good question. We have currently a linear economy, which very simply means take, make, and waste. So our current system is very much like produce a lot, produce it as cheap as possible with cheap energy and cheap labor, and then dispose it, and then we don't use the materials anymore. And a circular economy really pledges for a system where we actually, in the end, do not link resources to an economy, so we decouple it almost. It's not an economy driving by just producing and producing and taking new resources, but actually rethinking what we use for what purposes and design it differently so we can actually keep resources in the loop. We use renewable energies and we use regenerative models, which basically means that we should only impact people and environment positively and not negatively. And that's an economy that could save us from a lot of climate, biodiversity, and also social issues we're currently facing.
Not asking, Karen, if there are countries that have gotten this right, but I guess what I'm asking is, are there countries that are further along on this conversation of circular economies as opposed to a linear economy, which you described nicely, that it's based on a model that says take, make, and waste? Are there countries that are further along that we can pinpoint to and say, if we wanted to go in the direction of a circular economy and reduce our impact on the climate and the planet, here are some of the interesting insights of these countries?
Thanks. Yeah, it's quite a good but also complicated question, I would say. Yes, because it's a completely new system and it's a new economy, and therefore we are in different contexts. So South Africa is a different country from Kenya. So if you look, and yet they have similarities. So I would say, in terms of developing strategies, the Western countries are really adopting this model and trying to really increase renewable energy as much as they can and really change the current system. And I think the benefit for some countries in Africa is that there is, we can still leapfrog. There's systems that we haven't adopted yet and that are actually not great for us, and we can leapfrog. For instance, Kenya on renewable energy is almost 83% already renewable. That would be a great inspiration also, I think, for South Africa, and looking at how to transition to less fossil fuels and adopt those renewable energy concepts. And then I would also say that as a society, I think a lot of traditional knowledge and cultures have been very circular not so long ago, maybe 2-3 generations ago. The Maasai culture didn't have any waste. They used what there was available in nature, and they kept on using it, and nothing went to waste. And there was nothing that couldn't actually leave this earth in a good way. So I would say there's a lot of examples of great circularity in Africa, and yes, there are also very nice examples in other parts of the world. For instance, e-mobility, which we have way less in our continent yet.
Yeah, and I asked this because some years ago I heard someone saying that Singapore, nothing goes to waste in Singapore. If it can be reused, it will be collected, gathered somewhere downstream, and reused, and so on and so forth.
I think there's definitely models where we can learn from. I would say Rwanda really made very bold governmental decisions on policies regarding plastics and really banned a lot. And for instance, in Kenya, I run the Kenyan Plastic Pact, which is 1 out of 13. There's another one in Africa, which is in South Africa, the South African Plastics Pact, and really looking in how can we phase out problematic and unnecessary plastics and build and make sure that what we use is either reusable or recyclable, and preferably reused in the same way. Because if we only create, for instance, post-consumer plastics packaging for your food, if that becomes a brick to build with, it creates sometimes also different problems like microplastics. But ultimately, you want to actually close the loop of the demand for that packaging. You don't want to create new packaging out of virgin materials. You want to actually keep the materials in the loop. And collectively and in partnerships with both companies, civil society, NGOs, as well as the government, we try to really look in how can we change that and make sensible and choices that we can actually truly implement.
In all of this, Karen, part of the reason why we are even talking about a World Circular Economy Forum, it's implied in that there is an economy to speak of. Give us a sense then of what that economy looks like, over and above just being about, doing good and doing right by the planet. Is there an economy here that we can speak of, and how do people, from your experience, how easy or how difficult is it to move from these concepts and ideas that we are talking about to actually having an actual economy, a production and value chains, that can sustain an economy and livelihoods from all of this?
Yes. There are massive opportunities in terms of inclusivity in a circular economy, because what you would ultimately create is materials staying in the loop, and that will allow for repair, for actually remanufacturing, for refurbishment of products that we are currently using, and only in the end recycling and creating maybe in the last step biofuels or alternative fuels out of it. So there is a lot of extra steps. Now we just produce something and then we use it and we throw it away. Imagine if you don't do that and you keep that in the loop. So that can create a whole new economy in itself. The other opportunity is, and you are asking very rightfully, how viable is that? We obviously need enabling policies to support that, because if we make charcoal still cheaper than briquettes to cook with made out of agri waste, then obviously we need to incentivize actually a new economy. And if we don't do that, it's very hard to beat the issues that we're currently having, and also to actually convert to a new system where that works. And it depends on the country you're in, which value chains are really more receptive. If you look at, for instance, textile production, or actually before that, raw materials like cotton, there's a massive increase in demand for organic cotton. And that's a great opportunity. So that will only mean that that's much better for the soil, it's much better for the environment, and it's much better for the people working in that sector, not only in terms of health, but also in terms of earnings. So there are a lot of benefits, but it depends also where you sit. In plastics, for instance, in Kenya, the transition to a circular economy will create instantly a lot of jobs. The reason being is that we do not have produce actually the raw materials, the virgin materials. So we're not cutting out jobs and that end. We're actually transforming jobs that are existing and adding jobs on the value chain.
Yeah. Karen, let's bring into this conversation, don't go anywhere, Karen, but I'd like to bring into this conversation Kari Herlevi, who is from the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, and he is the global collaboration, the head of the global collaboration unit for sustainability solutions. Kari, good afternoon. Thank you for your time joining us from Helsinki in Finland. You are among the people that are the sponsors and the organizers and basically partners for this World Circular Economy Forum coming to Africa. Why is this an important conversation that should be amplified and be heard in Africa at this moment?
Thank you for, first of all, for the invitation to speak here and discuss about this. I'm not an expert in any way in the African context, but I think we have a lot to learn from Africa and the solutions that are at the moment created in African context and different countries. And in my opinion, Africa could also lead the way in many ways and bring up those kind of solutions that are also relevant for different markets outside of Africa. I think we all know the examples of the mobile phones and how innovative usage is in the African context. And in the circular economy, this could be another area to leapfrog and innovate in a new ways. So I think those are the key reasons why the spotlight is in Africa this time. And like the title is From Africa to the World, it really tries to showcase through our African partners what could be done in the continent.
Yeah. Kari, let me stick with you for a moment. So who takes part at this World Circular Economy Forum? Who are the people, who are the various voices that will be heard? And I guess I ask that necessarily to then ask what will constitute a successful outcome at the end of that forum with all of these players being under one roof for a couple of days?
Good question. Certainly, it is more or less the decision makers globally that convene in Rwanda, Kigali, this year. And the key players certainly come from the African context. They are like African Development Bank, African Circular Economy Alliance, African Circular Economy Network, so ASEAN. So all of those, and to top on that, of course, different businesses, private sector that are showcasing the solutions. Usually, and also this year, there is a strong private partnership models in place. So a lot of companies are joining, and I think one of the key of the success is really that this brings the policy and private sector together to come up with solutions. And there is in each forum kind of takeaways to the next one, but not only in the kind of in the succession of the forums, but also different stakeholders have their own agendas to drive change forward. And we are, of course, very keen to see that will there be like the African kind of leadership in this and how that will materialize through the forum.
Yeah. Karen, the final word to you, are there certain, what we like to call in the terminology, low-hanging fruit that African countries, policymakers, and governments and private sector players really can easily leverage by simply switching the outlook from a linear economy to a circular economy? Are there those pointers that you could point to that say, we could take the lead in these areas as a continent?
Yes, I think we can, definitely with the support we have been receiving globally, with global policies as well, like the UN Global Treaty on Plastics coming up. And that really allows Africa as a continent also to shape that strategy and those guidelines together and to see what's working and really be firm on that. And we've seen it with the COP27 as well. It's also time to see who is playing which role and what's the impact of it, and how can we find and create best solutions to do so. So what we see, for instance, I think a really great case is on renewable energies, but also on how we take the plastic situation up as a partnership of the Plastics Pact. I think it's great to see that there's such a big momentum to really drive the change. There's EPRs coming up, and that simply means extended producer responsibility policies, both in Kenya as well as in South Africa, and we have them in other parts of the world. But it's very unique to have them so from the start, where there's still a lack of the infrastructure that we need to build around waste management. Yeah. We see that there's an adoption of sustainable waste management policies from the start. There are single-use plastic bans coming into place, and I think we make strong statements in that, and we actually facilitate the change and come up with solutions and innovations that will lead the way in those areas.
Yeah. Kari, last word to you. Is this the processes you are engaged in, could they be compared to the conversation around the just energy transition in the context of transitioning from a high to a low carbon economy in as far as the climate change negotiations are concerned? But also at the same time, what are some of the pointers that you can point to and milestones, this being the 6th such forum, that you can say over a period of time, these are some of the sort of direct consequences and outcomes that we have seen slowly being implemented since we started holding this forum?
Excellent question. And I think we are in a very early phase globally in the transition. But of course, this year's crisis and also Russia's attack in Ukraine and also the energy crisis that we are facing, there is a speed up in the green transition, and also I think circular economy is more important than ever, because now the discussions is also about where do you source the raw materials, do you have enough supply of them, and how to maintain the value of those materials that we have in the society already. So this is like a very important debates, and this didn't happen 6-7 years ago when we started the forum. So definitely, like in the bigger global discussions, the material use has come to the forefront of energy. So together, these two are very critical when we think about green transition and how to push the green agenda forward globally.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining me. It's a fascinating conversation, and we'll certainly be watching it very closely as it unfolds in the coming days. There was Karen Boomsma from Kenya Plastics Pact, where she is project lead, and Kari Halevi, who is head of the Global Collaboration Unit for Sustainability Solutions at the Finnish Innovation Fund.